So, welcome everyone. I am so excited today to be here with Arlene Duane Heminway. And she is the author of this absolutely delightful book, which we are going to be talking about. And it's called A Twist of Lemon: 100 Curious Stories in Exactly 100 Words. And I especially love this book. Not only do I love it as a book, but I'm also love it because it was published by the Three Tomatoes Book Publishing, which is now 1 year old. And Arlene, I think you were our third book, and we've now
Oh,
published 10.
wonderful. Ah,
So welcome. I'm so excited to be able
thank
to talk
you.
to you about your writings and drabbles. But I always like to start with people's, especially with women with our backgrounds. And you have a wonderful background. You have a master's degree from Juilliard School of Music. You majored in the organ. You were a piano and vocal teacher on Long Island. You've been an organist for many, many different groups. And in fact, you've performed with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir at Radio City Music Hall, and you've worked in several other events in New York. So you really had a really wonderful career in teaching and being a vocal teacher, a music teacher, and also as a performer. And then you retired. And what I found so interesting was that then you went into the healing arts, and you're now a certified hypnotherapist and Reiki master. So tell me, how did you transition into the healing arts? And was that any part of music that you took with you into that? So I'm just curious because I love that transition.
There are many things that happened. There were people who were hurting themselves in the school that I taught and had come in with sprained ankles, and all of a sudden I was inadvertently just reaching out and putting my hand on a shoulder or something, and someone would say, "Ah, how did you know?" And I'd say to myself, "How did I know what?" But it was almost like a horror movie, because my hand was reaching out and I had no control over it. And when I started doing that, then I realized that there was something else going on besides the music. And I saw an ad in the paper about a course called Regenesis. And I got so excited about hearing what this course was going to be. I didn't even know exactly what to expect. And when I went, it was about reprogramming DNA. And I went, oh, that was it. I knew that this
Wow.
was something else I had to do. And to tell you how important it was to me, we had a snowstorm that year. And I come from New York, as you mentioned, and you know the snowstorms in New York can be 12 inches, 14 inches. Well, this is one of the heaviest. It was like 16 inches. And the place that the workshop was supposed to be given was several miles away. And the roads were closed. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and it's like 2 miles an hour, I can get there. This was how important this, not thinking, you're not going to be able to move. All the roads are closed. So this was what occurred. And that was a turning point, literally, in my life. After taking that and realizing this was something I had to do. And so after that, then I started literally working on people's illnesses and concerns at school, free of charge. I had a table, an 8-foot table that was in my classroom that I converted, in a sense, to a healing table, which is perfect because I could close the blinds at lunch, after school, and I could literally people out on the table. And people after a while would say, Arlene, I went skating the other day, I hurt myself. And I'd say, come on in. So I got a lot of practice. And to do this, I think I needed like 250 cases to document, and I had to write exactly what part of the body I touched. So this is the way it started. It was like one of those, I have to do this. But even to premise before that, people would cry when I played the organ. And it was the only organist that I know of, me, who had to play the entire postlude at the end of the service. There's a prelude and a postlude. and people usually come in the morning, a few minutes before the service to get quiet. People started coming in early so they could hear me play the entire prelude. And they didn't leave after the sermon was finished. They sat down, and it was incredible. And so I had to play every note of my postlude. Most organists just kind of vamped it for 10 minutes and left. Not me. I had to stay there. So I had unusual things happening that kind of led up to that thing with the hands and the healing. And it's most unusual, but it's one of those true stories that I don't tell too often because people would really, it sounds as if it's not true, but it really was.
Well, that's a remarkable story, and what a wonderful gift to be a healer. And it's interesting because I've spoken to a few other people in the healing arts, and I've heard many other people express a similar story of how they got into the healing arts, where they just had this gift. So thank you. That is a remarkable story, really. So now tell us how you got into writing. So did you start writing after you had retired from teaching, or were you doing that simultaneously?
I was doing that long before because my days started at 4:15 a.m. and did not end until about 10 o'clock every night. And I worked 7 days a week. So this was a way, in a sense, of giving me some kind of balance in my life. And every morning at 4:15, I meditated for about 15 minutes, for about 20 minutes to 30 minutes. And I had a routine, and I discovered I then would write calming things and statements that were in a journal that helped me to focus, because that's a long working day. And to go through that,
Yes. Oh my
go
gosh.
through that every day. Saturday and Sunday were a little different because I did have services, but I still had to come home and prepare because I was constantly preparing for the next service. When you're a church musician and a school musician, you have to do things for the season. So if you have a December concert, you start in September. You can't start in December. So if it's for March, you started many months beforehand, and you're constantly cranking these things out and scheduling. So that was a balance. And after doing that, again, I saw an ad in the paper that talked about free writing courses that were given at a local library. And I went to a couple of them, and the third one was the charm. That's where I was introduced to the drabble. And that changed my life. So I've had a couple of change your life moments.
You certainly have. So I have to say, before you brought your book to me, and I am a voracious reader of all genres, I had never heard of drabbles before, which I think sometimes are also referred to as microfiction and flash fiction. I'm not sure they're all the same, but can you explain what a drabble is? Because it's a really fascinating art form, I think.
Well, it is a form of microfiction, but it is usually microfiction can be much longer. It can be 500 words or so or longer. And a drabble is usually contained in 100 words, and that's it. And it started with me since I was taking lessons in a writing course, that I was writing much longer pieces. So I was writing the 500 to 1,000 pieces. I even drafted a book. And this challenge came in. And that's the way I was introduced to it, as were the other 12 to 15 people in the class. And we all said, what? No one had heard of it. And I'll tell you, even today, publishers have not heard of it. And I'm surprised when I come across editors have not heard of it. So it's still one of those, what? It's there, and I love it.
Well, it's so fascinating for me, and what really got me so excited when I started to read yours, and I want you to read one of them in a minute so people will actually understand what we're talking about. What was amazing is that you can tell a story in 100 words, and the precision of the words, and what a difficult genre this is. And we'll talk a little more about that, but why don't you read one of them so people will get a
Sure.
sense of what a drabble is about and how exciting this genre actually is.
Okay, I'm going to start with something that is based on a partial true experience of mine. This happened to me in the park, because I do walk in the park. And I did actually come out and find something on my windshield. The rest is fiction.
Okay.
And I've changed, I've put some names in, but it started with that, like, what is this sign on my windshield? And it is called Differing Opinions. After his daily park run, Shilbley found a note on his windshield. Although we bear no resemblance, I respect Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, even when it's not his birthday, as it is today. I see you as a vibrant child of God. We are the same. Our hopes, dreams, and prayers come from the same source, Yahweh. May the great benevolent be with you all of your days. Love and light, Christopher. When Shilbley returned to his car in a church parking lot that afternoon, he had 4 flat tires and a license plate stickered with a Confederate flag.
I just love that. I love it. And every one of them, people, if you're going to want to read this book, every one of them draws you in. It's almost like a little trailer, because then I always found myself saying, and what then? And then you start to really think about these stories, which is what is just so fascinating to me. And also, I noticed in yours, sometimes you would continue a theme or a story in a different drabble, right?
Well, there are some that are connected, because each story is, you can stop at the end of that, but there's just so much more that I realize when I get to the end, that's not all. And I have to continue it. So some of them are 4-parters, some of them are 3-parters, some are just 2-parters. But each one usually is able to stand on its own.
Yes.
So it's an individual story, but they're all connected. You don't miss it. If someone didn't tell you the other parts,
Right. But
you
I
wouldn't.
love that, because it was almost like this little surprise, because you're reading about one, and then a little later you're like, oh, now here's another way of
Yeah.
another piece of that story that we hadn't heard before.
Mhm.
So it's just fascinating. You're incredible. You're really a master at crafting these, Arlene, because this is not an easy genre. To be able to do this so succinctly and find the right words and come up with the story, I think is really amazing. And the other thing too, I think, as people start to read them, I think these are a great book club read, because I think everyone will interpret them differently, and they're conversation starters. Every single one of them, you could have, a half an hour conversation around them, which I think is really fantastic. And another thing too, I find right now that during the pandemic, I think
Mm.
we all, those of us who love to read, we all say, oh gosh, wouldn't it be so nice if I had time to read? And then what I have found with so many people, now that they have had time to read, that a lot of people are really having trouble concentrating. And I've had people say, I've tried to pick up a book and I just can't concentrate. And I think that's a lot of the stress and anxiety. So I would just like to say, I think these are perfect for that, because you could just pick the book up. You can go to any place in the book and read a story, and it's just, they're just an absolute delight. So tell me, how do you start writing? How do you start a drabble? Because I know one of the really great things that you're doing now is you're also helping other people to write drabbles as well. So how do you start to write a drabble?
Basically, I have evoked a muse. I have a drabble muse that I ask to be with me 24/7. And I'm telling you, the muse is with me 24/7. At any time, during any conversation or watching anything or reading anything, I will frequently say, ah, that's a drabble. And so I will have a little piece of paper, and I have pieces of paper and pads and pens all over. I will write that down so I don't forget it. And then I put it in an envelope, a clear plastic envelope. So I have so many possible titles. Sometimes it comes out that, I know exactly what the title of that is going to be. Or it will be just the subject matter written down. And sometimes even when I'm writing, the name of the person will just crop up. This has got to be so-and-so who was doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So it is so that I started that pattern, and I have so many more drabble titles and or subjects that I've been able to address. If I wrote for 8 hours a day, every day, maybe I would get through, maybe. And then when I actually craft it, it always comes out where I will take a legal pad and a pencil. There's something to me about the graphite in a pencil that scrapes across the page. And I believe that writing with a pencil, and sometimes if a pencil isn't handy, a pen, it connects to the heart to me. So to me, it comes through and it goes through the heart and it goes through the pen. And that's when it comes out. But it's that process that goes. And that's the way I do it. So at any time I'll say, oh, that's another one. And sometimes I do, write it down, put it in an envelope, because otherwise I'm afraid I'll forget something.
Right. So when you start writing, do you usually write a longer piece and then edit down to the 100 words?
Yes, sometimes they come out in 250, but it doesn't bother me because I realize this is the story. So it's not like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. This is the story. I know that this is what I need to tell. Right. Now, from the time it starts to the time it ends, sometimes the characters have switched places. Sometimes the names have changed. They've changed names. Sometimes the circumstances have changed, but basically the story kernel is still there. And I don't repeat a name twice. So if there was one John in the story, you probably are not going to find John somewhere else. Maybe he'll show up later on as a Juan or something, but that's a different culture and ethnicity to me. So it's connected to a different kind of essence. So I will look through and I have a list of names. I even take down people's names. I'll talk to somebody with 18. What is your name? That's a beautiful name. What's the derivation? And they're so glad to tell me. Oh, this is Hawaiian. Oh, this comes, I'm from Puerto Rico. So I've got all these names that are so unusual that have yet to be written about.
Well, I'm so glad you said that, because that was another thing. I mean, you have some very unusual names throughout some of your characters. So do you find that your characters take over you?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes I said I will head them in one direction and they'll say, that's not where I'm going. And they will back right around. But it's still the story that needs to be written.
Right.
So in the long run, it's great if the story writes itself, but frequently they'll start off at sometimes 250 words or 200 words, and then the challenge begins, and that sometimes takes 12 hours. I can sit down at the computer, because then it goes into the computer after it's longhand, and I'm sitting there, and I realize it's 12 midnight, and I've been there from 4 o'clock in the afternoon, haven't even eaten. But I'm so excited. This is how engrossed I become in it. Everything is blocked out. If I'm sitting there, I love it that much. I really love it.
That is so great. That is so wonderful. That's how I feel about writing too. It's such, it takes over you, actually. Mm-hmm. So read us another drabble, because really these are wonderful. They're funny. Some of them are wicked. They're intense. You basically cover every human emotion is covered in these stories. I just love it. Humor, treachery, love, hatred.
Yeah, just about everything. And this one is also based on someone that I used to eat lunch with where I worked. And it started out that this was somebody who was a very, very tiny person. And I wondered why she was eating celery and carrots for lunch. She was so tiny that you figured that any strong wind that came in would probably blow her away. And she said her husband told her that she needed to stay in her bikini. And I just didn't make a comment. It was like, whoa, what sounded a little controlling. So this is based on that. And then, of course, the rest is fiction. Behold the changing goose. After a few years of married life, Henry became His Majesty. He no longer kept in shape, but insisted his wife, Nadine, remain size 0. Her birthday and their anniversary, no longer considered important, were conveniently forgotten. Henry flaunted his dominance by becoming drunk, often touching Nadine shamelessly in front of friends. Once again, Nadine received a familiar text, quote, "I'll be working late," unquote. Arriving at a restaurant with a female client, he became agitated after spying his wife dining with a striking, sober, six-packed escort. Later that evening, feathers flew in the castle. His Majesty was demoted to Prince Henry.
That's one of my favorites. That is so perfectly told. What a great example of a perfect drabble that is. I just love it. So are you still, you're writing drabbles all the time?
Yes, I don't have as much time to write as I used to, but I'm still collecting, and the last 3 weeks I've written 2 drabbles. So I'm trying to up the ante to write. I'm aiming for 1 a week. That would be great if I could do that.
Fabulous.
But circumstances haven't worked out, but I still have quite a number of new drabbles that are in the hopper that have already been completed, and that's a good thing for me.
Well, I think that's great. I think I hear another book coming.
I don't know, possibly in the future, that would be nice.
Oh, I think that is so wonderful. So you are so inspiring, really, and you're such a wonderful example of I think women moving from into different stages of their lives. And at the Three Tomatoes, we're all about celebrating women and celebrating our age and our stages at every stage of life, and telling women to dream big and not to give up on their dreams. And I know that we've all seen people who transitioned, whether it's they've retired from a job, or they've lost a job or something, and they find themselves really not knowing what to do next. So it's so wonderful. I know you've never been one of those people.
No, never.
So great to just see you keep moving and keep evolving. And that's really what I think wonderful aging is all about. So you're a great example of that, I think, to all of us, that's for sure. So we thank you for that.
And I'm grateful that you found them delightful. And
I do.
Yes, I will do it. So thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, it's been terrific. So I think we should close with one more drabble.
Okay. Now, not all of the drabbles that I write, as you've mentioned, are funny or happy. So I thought maybe this would be a contrast, perhaps, to some of the others. It's more thought-provoking, and it is quite different from the other 2 that I read before. Many people in their lives have incidences that, especially as children, that they never get over. And it colors the rest of their lives. I know some people in my life who've had experiences. Some of them have powered through, some of them are stuck because they cannot forget what happened to them.
Mhm.
So now we're hearing a lot more in the news about these things as people discovered, yes, something needs to be done. And in this case, you'll find out what happened to one young lady who had one of those circumstances occur to her. This is called Farewell Forever. Things became unbearable when Malavita's mother confronted her husband about the abuse. Denying accusations, he called her a liar. The 11-year-old was suddenly shipped to out-of-state relatives. Malavita only returned to the house once when attending her mother's funeral 20 years later. She blamed her father for her untimely death. Now, at 43, memories of her painful past still haunted her. Dry-eyed, Malavita waited until the last guest left the gravesite. She walked to the soon-to-be-filled void, paused, turned, and returned to her car. No rose was offered. From a distance, she released each shovel of dirt, especially the last.
That is very powerful. The power of 100 words. That is really remarkable. Well, this has just been such a delight to talk to you about your writing, your career, your healing. You are truly an amazing woman. I'm so happy to know you, and I'm so honored to have published your book. And it's a twist of lemon. It's available on Amazon. It's available at booksellers everywhere. And Arlene also has a wonderful website. It's Arlene Duane Heminway.com, and you can find out more about drabble writing, and she's doing a drabble challenge there. We'll make sure that we have the URL up here. And then my very last question is, we have to ask you if there's any relationship to that other famous Hemingway.
Well, I've been asked that so many times, but there isn't as far as I know. And I always refer to that as he's the one who has the six-toed cats. So I don't have any cats, so that's not, I'm not related as far as I know. I like cats though, but you know, yeah.
But I will say one of the things, the other Hemingway is also one of my very favorite writers, always has been. And one of the things that I've always appreciated about Ernest Hemingway's writing is his very precise and
Yeah,
concise use of language. So
absolutely.
I do think if he was around and he could read your drabbles, he would very much approve and be very proud of them, because I think that's such a talent, a rare talent to be able to.
Thank you for having this, and I appreciate so much everything that you're doing, but not only on my behalf, but for other women as well. And let's hope this will be something perhaps we'll do again at another time.
I hope so. This has been so great. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.